Alright, this is Jack Gannon doing the presentation response video for Cole's presentation on Alger Hiss. I have not really had the opportunity to learn about Alger Hiss in any great detail beyond just a cursory Wikipedia search, so having this kind of deep dive, structured, more academic presentation was quite fun. I enjoyed that. It also helped alleviate any real concerns I had with doing my own presentation on length and content and just general structure. And it's always easier to do something when you've seen someone else do it. I'll structure the rest of my video in just some questions and then some things that I think you did well. First question, you noted how an FBI analyst was able to determine the authenticity of some of the pumpkin papers based on the Woodstock typewriter Hiss used to write at least some of them. And I was curious as to how exactly they did that. Was it that the keys themselves were impacting the paper in a unique way? Was it the chemical composition of the ink strip? This kind of forensic stuff is A, way outside my wheelhouse, and B, really interesting to me, probably for that reason. So, again, if you want to respond to this, feel free, but if you don't you don't have to. Second, on slide 5, I believe, you mentioned how the FBI got two separate indications that Hiss was a spy, or at least strong hints. One was that from the French in, let me look, I think in 1948, let me see. Sorry, the video just lagged there. French intelligence in 1939, they used a Soviet agent, and then in 1942, Chambers met with the FBI and said that he was a communist, which doesn't directly make him guilty, obviously, but certainly puts a target on his back. And then both instances, you say the FBI, quote, mishandled the information, which I'm interested as to how they actually did that. Is it like the information was in a filing cabinet somewhere in Langley and it never made its way up the chain to Hoover or FDR or anyone important, or was it that they just didn't believe them at all? It was just kind of interesting to hear, because obviously this is, if they were warned twice or 1.5 times, if you want to be generous, then it's kind of egregious that they missed it that much. I would like to learn more about that. Let me see. The second one, when I learned about McCarthyism, the kind of list that he had, he said that he could have his list full of dozens of commies in the State Department and other places. And I always kind of saw that as hyperbole, characteristic of the Red Scare. But the fact that we had Hiss, Chambers, the third female spy, Hede, and an additional communist spy in the State Department that Hiss and Hede argued about, that's a little concerning. It kind of sheds some light onto why McCarthy had his list. I mean, obviously we know that most, if not all, the people on his list were just unfounded reaching. But do you think that had this trial gone differently, that if it had been settled earlier, if Chambers didn't delay his evidence, do you think that the Red Scare would have, I'm sure it would have existed at all, but I think it would have been much less prominent and much less damaging to the social fabric of America. So that kind of counterfactual is interesting to contemplate. And then finally, you mentioned that one of the reasons perhaps that the FBI didn't pick up on Hiss was that there was a peacetime intelligence drain. This is kind of well founded in our textbook about how U.S. intelligence, especially, has kind of gone through a boom and bust cycle that only really stopped after the Second World War, where it was during wartime there'd be a whole bunch of resources and money and personnel and interest focused in espionage and counter-espionage intelligence and what have you, often led directly by Washington or Benjamin Franklin or Lincoln or what have you. And then once at peacetime, then it was all kind of withered on the vine because it's peacetime. Like, we don't need a intelligence agency. We're not that's despotic. And then it kind of changed to be more realistic. But not to like, obviously, like, I'm not saying this as a personal attack, but I don't entirely buy that the peacetime intelligence drain was responsible for not catching Hiss sooner, mainly because, like, when Hiss was still doing his damage, it was smack dab in the middle of the Second World War. He started in 1938. He was there at Yalta with FDR and only really ended when the war ended in, I think, 45 and 46 is when he left. So I'm just wondering, like, is the kind of boom and bust cycle, do you think that was just because the intelligence agencies as we know it as a kind of a permanent structured entity was kind of young at this point? Do you think that's why he slipped through the net? Or I'm curious, kind of start a dialogue on that one. And then moving on to things that I think you did well. I like how structured it was, and frankly, like, in my mind, the fact that it was structured at all is a benefit because it allowed me to focus on what I was going to do. Kind of a cradle to grave, then diving into the minutiae of the trial. I especially like the photo slide. I'm a sucker for photos, but with a caveat, because they have to be necessary, because a lot of photos are just to fill up space or so I don't have to talk and give someone to look at. But having these photos, like the actual pumpkin in which it was hid, was, I think, very interesting to look at. And having the pictures have to have some sort of historical value, in my opinion, which I think yours did. So thank you for that. And then, I do wish you did this a little more, but I also enjoy the part that you have, the kind of glimpse into the courtroom strategy of Chambers' trial and his trial. I have always liked that kind of back and forth, nitty gritty procedural details. I think that was very interesting overall. And overall, you did great. I hope the video works this time, and I will start a dialogue with you if you want to.